Hey, this is Tony with Salt Strong, and in this video we're going to be talking about kayak and paddleboard safety. What are some things that you should consider doing or not doing, and also some items that you can have with you just to make it a little bit more of a safer experience out there on the water. And this can apply to anybody that either may be fishing from their kayak or paddleboard, or if they're just out there enjoying the outdoors and cruising around. Now, if you haven't done so already, definitely be sure to like and subscribe, as we put out new tips pretty much every day in relation to fishing, so definitely be sure to do that. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some of these things that you want to consider, and also some things that you want to have with you just to make it a little bit safer out there on the water. So first are visual aids. You want to have something or multiple things that can make you visible to other boaters and other people that might be out there on the water. So first off is a flag. Something that stands up taller or higher than your head when you're sitting down, because what a lot of people don't consider with kayaks and paddleboards is how low they sit to the water. If it's really choppy out, or there's some pretty high swells, if you're out there beyond the breakers or just off the beach, it can be tough for boats to see you when you're going down in the trough of those waves. So don't necessarily get mad at the boats if they can't see you, because it can be pretty difficult, especially if it's choppy out there. So having some sort of flag, a nice bright orange flag, you can make your own with a little fiberglass rod and either just an orange piece of cloth or an old t-shirt or something like that. You can make your own, or you can purchase them already made. This is the Yak Attack Visicarbon Pro, and it also has a light on it, which is definitely a plus. You can see there it has that all around 360 white light, which is also required in some states if you are on a kayak or a paddleboard in low light conditions. Early morning, later in the evening, also if it's overcast or raining, you have to have some sort of light on there, just like a boat does. So definitely check your local laws and regulations on that. Now, another visual aid can be yourself. Have a bright colored hat or a bright colored shirt on, such as fluorescent yellow. That can be a really good color to wear out there on the water. You may feel kind of weird wearing really bright clothing, but it could happen to save your life, especially if you're out there in heavy boat traffic or anything like that. So bright clothing, definitely something that can help you out and keep you safer out there. And lastly, with visual aids, is some sort of light. Even if you don't plan on being out there at night, something may happen or something may come up, or you're just catching a bunch of fish and you end up being on the water pretty late. You want to have some sort of light with you. I like to have a small, sort of like a tactical flashlight, very bright LED, and also one that has a strobing effect on it. That strobe has actually helped me out. I was actually sitting on a pretty shallow sandbar and I was fishing the area, and this boat was coming, and it was pretty foggy out, and the boat was coming straight at me. Even though I was on a shallow bar, I might have been okay if they were coming at me, but I sort of helped that boat out because they completely turned opposite direction once they saw me flash that strobe light. So it can help you out, and it can also help out other people. So definitely have some type of light with you. Could be a flashlight, or it could just be a headlamp that has that strobing effect on it. Now, next are what I consider audible aids, or something that produces a sound producing device. Again, this is something that may be required by law depending on where you're at. So you definitely want to make sure you are following those guidelines. Now, a whistle is a great all-around device. You can keep it with you. The important thing is actually keeping it on you. Don't just stick it in your storage compartment, because if you happen to fall out of your kayak and your kayak gets caught by the wind and it starts drifting away, you're now stuck and your whistle is in your kayak getting blown away. So make sure you have that sound producing device with you on at all times. This whistle you can keep on you. Air horn, it's kind of difficult to keep on you, but it can also be good to have one in your kayak in case you see a boat coming at you and they don't see you. Just something extra to signal off that boat. Now, next up are life jackets. I'm going to be completely transparent and honest here. I am very bad at this one. I'm very bad at wearing my life jacket, but it will save your life. Definitely make it a habit to wear your life jacket, because there's a big misconception out there that, well, I'm a strong swimmer, I don't need to wear it. Well, the truth is, if you fall out of your kayak, or you happen to become unconscious for some reason, fall out of your kayak, or you hit something when you're falling out of your kayak and become unconscious, you're no longer a strong swimmer. You're at the mercy of the water. So if you don't have your life jacket on and it doesn't flip you over to where your head is out of the water, you will actually succumb to drowning, because you have no way of keeping your head up because you're unconscious. So even if you're a strong swimmer, make sure you're wearing your life jacket. Now, comfort is definitely key, and it takes time to get used to. You know, when you first wear a life jacket while you're out there kayaking, it's not going to be comfortable. You're going to want to take it off. You're going to want to just put it away, but make sure you get used to it. It's just like wearing a work uniform. It's not going to be comfortable at first, but over time you get used to it and you start wearing it all the time. Now, if you are looking for one for kayak fishing, I highly recommend just getting this is a Type 3 life jacket. It's actually made for paddling. It has a high back on there. Also, it has wide armholes, and it has some mesh on there to make it a little bit more breathable. And it's not like one of those big bulky life jackets. It's just enough to get the job done, and you don't have to inflate it. And that brings up my next point about these automatic inflating life jackets, or the manual inflation. They are probably the most comfortable to wear, but in my opinion, they're just not practical. If you have a manually inflating life jacket, who's going to inflate that life jacket for you if you fall in the water and become unconscious? So that's just something you have to think about. Also, the automatic inflators, what it is, it's basically a little ring that has some type of chemical in it, and when that chemical gets wet, it actually expands and pushes the pin into the CO2 cartridge, which expands the life jacket. So as you know, if you're kayaking, you're usually getting wet. So if that does get wet, your life jacket's gonna pretty much inflate itself without you really doing it or pulling the pin or anything like that. So that's one big downfall about these. But again, they are super comfortable, but I just don't find them as safe as one of these standard padded life jackets. So now, aside from the equipment, there are a few things that you want to consider as far as what not to do and what to do when you're kayak or paddleboard fishing. And one of the biggest things I tell people to do is avoid areas with heavy boat traffic. So that would be channels, bridges, boat ramps. There's really no reason for you to be in those areas. There's really no reason for a kayak to be in a channel unless you may be fishing the edge of the channel. In that case, you have to stay out of the channel if you are fishing it. But a kayak, you have to understand, they float in very little water. So they can float in water that boats typically can't, or most boats anyway. Nowadays, some of these boats can float in 3 inches of water, but you want to stay out of those high traffic areas where boats mainly use to navigate, because you can easily just paddle right up against a shoreline where boats aren't going to be running back and forth. And also boat ramps. Try to stay away from boat ramps. It's convenient just because it's obviously a place you can launch from, but boat ramps are typically made for boats. They're made for trailers. You don't want to get in their way. Also, you're going to have a lot of boat traffic going in there. And the nice thing about a kayak is you can just dump it off to the side of the road. If there's a grassy area next to the boat ramp, use that area. Try to stay away from the boat ramps themselves. And next up, make sure you don't overpack your kayak or your paddleboard. You never want to meet or exceed the weight capacity of your kayak or paddleboard. And the reasoning for that is because the more stuff you put into it, the heavier it's going to get and the less stable it's going to become. It's going to become very unstable, and it just makes for an accident waiting to happen. So the general rule of thumb I like to tell people is never go over 100 pounds less than what your kayak or paddleboard is rated for. So what I mean by that, if let's say you have a weight capacity of 425 pounds, I would not go over 325 pounds of total weight added to that kayak. That includes you and your gear. So if you weigh 200 pounds, then you have about a buffer of about 125 pounds that you can bring gear. And then you have that extra 100 pounds until you get to the actual weight capacity. And again, you never want to go over that 100-pound buffer. Now, next up with kayak safety is make sure you get your feet wet before venturing out too far. And what I mean by this is get comfortable with your kayak, get comfortable with how it feels. What I did when I first started out kayak fishing was I took it to a lake a few times, a nice small lake. It was safe. I didn't have a lot to worry about, not a lot of boat traffic, private lake. So get used to it. Also, like I said, you never want to just buy a kayak and go straight out to the ocean because you have to deal with surf launching and getting back in, which definitely takes practice. So just make sure you practice all these little skills, make sure you're comfortable paddling. If you like standing up, try to get used to standing up in your kayak somewhere where it's a little bit safer, nice shallow lake, or even a swimming pool. Just stay away from the walls, make sure you're in the middle of the swimming pool, that way if you fall, you don't hit your head or anything like that. But again, make sure you're comfortable with kayaking before venturing out too far. Now, last but not least, and probably most important, is to make sure to stay in contact with somebody or have a way to contact somebody when you're out there on the water. Now, cell phones are nice and all, but the batteries die pretty quick nowadays, and also most of the places we go to on the water don't have cell reception. You'll be in and out constantly. Highly recommend getting yourself a handheld floating marine radio. Now, type of brand, this one here is a Cobra. This is the Marine HH350 that I have here. Battery lasts quite a long time. Also, make sure your battery's charged before you go out, and try not to leave it on when you're on the water. Only turn it on when you need to. That will definitely help reserve the battery for emergencies. Also, make sure to leave a float plan with somebody. I highly recommend writing it down. Usually when you tell somebody something over time, they may forget. So definitely write it down, but what you're basically doing is just telling somebody where you're going, when you're going, and when you plan to be back. That way they have a good idea of what's going on. That way if you're a little bit too late, then they can start worrying a little bit. They can go check on you. They can have somebody go check on you and make sure everything's okay. So definitely stay in contact. Have a radio and leave a float plan. So hopefully this video will help you out if you are new to kayaking or paddleboarding, and even if you have been doing it a while, sometimes we need these reminders just to make sure we're following these basic guidelines for safety so that we don't make our next trip our last trip. So hopefully this will help you out. So if you like this video, definitely be sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're interested in catching more inshore fish, if you're having a tough time out there on the water, definitely check out our Salt Strong Insider Fishing Club, where we basically tell you where to go fish, when to go fish, what to use in 10 minutes or less every week. So if you're having a tough time with that, definitely be sure to check that out. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. Also, we'd like to know any additional safety tips that you might have for kayaking and paddleboarding, so definitely let us know down below as well. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.
There's something about the water that'll give you peace, all by yourself or with your family. Live salt strong and wear the line today.